Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
Hey, Barry Manning here. Welcome to the Garden Report Studio Edition. Sorry we're late. We are live before Celtics Pacers tonight. Two-game miniseries, which I always love, and it's good timing because the Celtics in a bit of a rut here, losing 3 of their last 4, something they didn't do last season, and probably off their 2 worst losses of the year considering the positions they were in that Orlando game and in the Philadelphia game. So we'll start with Philly on Christmas. We didn't get to talk about it at length. No, after the game there. But interesting in 2 facets, given that the Celtics haven't played well here, and that Philly's starting to turn this thing around, winning 7 of 10, getting a statement win here against Boston. And with all the pieces intact, and this being the first time all season that they've run this lineup, including Martin and Maxey, George, and Embiid, they looked like the team that they were supposed to be coming into the year, and we both thought that they were going to be the biggest threat to Boston in the East, and in this game, they kind of looked like it.
Yeah, they looked like it. At the same time, I think some of the concerns around Joel Embiid's health, and, I still have those concerns. Like, I still worry about Joel Embiid getting through the playoffs, facing the Celtics in the conference finals. But they were kind of at their best, even though Paul George didn't have a great game. I think you saw Tyrese Maxey be the superstar that I think that he kind of already is / is becoming, and then when they're role players, like when Caleb Martin's the Caleb Martin from Miami, he's a good player, and he oftentimes is not that guy. So I don't know if that performance is going to be replicable, but overall, I think that you saw a lot of good things out of Philadelphia, and in the same way that I was kind of disappointed and surprised at how Boston came out, you got to give credit where it's due, and I do feel like the 76ers got up for that game and recognized this is an opportunity for us to be on national television on Christmas Day, to showing people that we're not the same team that we were earlier in the season that was really struggling.
The Maxey stuff's most interesting to me. And going into the game, obviously we talked about it on Monday, and I was like, there's no way Philly actually wins this thing. And of course they did. Maxey, though, going in, I said that's the guy you worry about because the Celtics have struggled with those kind of players throughout this year. Zach LaVine, John Moran, the guys that can get downhill and beat their perimeter defenders off the dribble have given them a bunch of issues defensively this year. And that was the big talk after this game is what's going on with this defense. We caught up with Sam Heiser this morning who said it, like Joe, that the offense is impacting the defense. And the numbers are similar. And I don't like to go off that too much because in 2023, I keep saying that whole year they were like second in defense. And it ended up falling apart into the playoffs. They were a disaster defensively that postseason. And that's what worries me right now, if anything, is that we're starting to see the inconsistency, the lack of identity. And that's the big thing. I feel like they don't know who they are defensively right now or who they want to be. And the lapses, like the Maxey play at the end there, which I'll mention a million times. Probably their worst defensive moment of the season right there.
Yeah, I think you're right. The numbers, I saw today, I know Kirk Goldsberry does like the, last 10 games efficiency, and the Celtics have the number 5 defense over the last 10 games. And so when you look at just the numbers, like, yeah, they've been fine. But I think anybody that's watching this team every night feels like there's something different about the defensive connectivity, just the locked, how locked in they are. And then you see them at their best. Like there was that stretch. I think what we kind of forget almost about that 76ers game on Christmas Day is that they almost came back from being down 15 in the fourth quarter.
Yep.
And that was mostly defense. That was Jaylen Brown kicking it to another gear. It was Pritchard also. And, they got 3 steals in those final 3 minutes, 0 steals the rest of the game. And so you see glimpses of like, okay, this team has every reason to be a good defensive team. They really do. No team is going to be perfect from a personal standpoint, but their roster is constructed to be as close as you can find. When Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are playing to their best defensively, and Drew Holiday and Derek White are, and you have Porzingis and they have enough. And so they very rarely have somebody that can really be exploited on that end. And so it's a mentality and it's a focus. And right now, I think from an 82 game season, like there's gonna be stretches where you see a lack of intent on that end. And I still am not overly concerned about it. But if in 2 weeks we're still having the same conversation, I think then it becomes more than just a string of bad games and it turns into like maybe this is who this team is. But I'm not ready to go there yet because ultimately like they played 82 games last year. They had a long playoff run, 3 guys in the Olympics team. Like it's just human nature at a point to not bring it in every single night.
Yeah, and I wrote after the game, this team's different. I think we're at the point where it's not the same team as last year. It's not the same personnel, certainly, even though it's a pretty similar team. And there's been so many injuries so far. Drew Holiday misses this game. Kristaps Porzingis has missed a ton of time to begin this year, on and off with tweaks since he got back from his injury that forced him out for the first couple months or so there. And that's, I think, part of why they've been so off-balance defensively. And part of it is your different defense with Porzingis in there and Holiday, certainly. And then they've gone back and forth between a bunch of priorities, I feel like. Start of the year, they're trying to take away threes. Then Porzingis comes back, they're taking away the paint, and they flip pretty quickly to being the best rim protection team in the league at that point. Then teams start to drill them from three, and they're caught in between what they want to stop, what they want to take away here. And that's why I say they lack an identity defensively, because you look back at 2022, it's Rob Williams roaming, it's them switching everything. You knew what that team was all about defensively. 2023, it's kind of like, we don't know who's closing these games. Is it Smart? Is it Brogdon? Is it White? I think that led to some of the inconsistency of that team. And that's why this year feels a little similar to me, because it's like, who's going to play tonight? Who's in? Who's out? Who's closing? There's the whole Pritchard Holiday thing, too. And I think the Holiday aspect to that is actually a bigger deal than we're making out to be, because he was the engine, the driving force, the quarterback of the defense last year, and he was out there pretty consistently the whole way. And, of course, he's had his offensive struggles, too. But if he can't get out there every night, and, whether it's the shoulder, the knee, and all that, that limits this team's upside defensively, I feel like.
Yeah, I mean, Drew Holiday is critical to this team, and I think when we think about last year's championship, like, he might have been the X factor that they haven't had in previous seasons that actually helped them get over the top. I don't know that you can attribute it to one guy, but if you do attribute it to one guy, he's certainly in contention for that. I have a hard time, like, I don't want to say complaining, but talking about Celtics injuries this season, because compared to what other teams are dealing with league-wide, where they've had these massive, serious injuries to their star players, which I feel like most teams have had, they have been relatively healthy. It's kind of these knicky-knack things where guys are missing a couple games here, a couple games there, with the exception of Porzingis, who obviously has missed extended time. But I'm not worried about Holiday from a health standpoint. He has been in and out of the lineup, as has a bunch of the guys, and maybe that lack of continuity with that starting five has hurt them. I mean, I think you look at the Knicks starting five, they've been out there every single game, it's been just a few games where the Celtics have had their full top six available, between Porzingis being out and Holiday and Derek, and everybody's missed some time. So I get what you're saying, but I think that can't be the explanation here ultimately, just considering like how other teams have been dealing with significant things.
So what has made them so inconsistent in recent weeks, you feel like?
I think it's just a mindset thing. I think it's really hard to replicate the real emotion of losing in Game 7 to the Heat. Like, they came back that following season with this obsession with winning a championship, and you could see it every night. There were so few let-ups. There was a handful of games, but really not a lot considering the length of a season where they just weren't 100% locked in. And we saw what happened with Denver last year. Like, when you win that championship, there's a reason why it's so hard to do it again. Nobody since the Warriors has even made it to the conference finals. Like, that is an insane statistic when you think about it.
This could be a season-long, not issue, but factor in
yeah, absolutely.
They repeat or not.
And I think that's why when people started saying, like, is this team going to be a dynasty? Like, is this a shoe-in? It's just not the way this league is built. This league is not, right now, especially with the new CBA, like, it's not built for dynasties. And so they're swooping against the current here. And the reason that I felt confident from the beginning of the season, and I still do, that this group has the ability to repeat when most teams haven't, is because of the individual guys that are kind of running the show there. Between Joe Mazzulla, who I think is an excellent personal motivator, between Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, who are two stars that are known for their hard work and their continued improvement in this league. Guys like Al Horford, who are just great locker room presences. Like, I don't know that all these other championship teams have had all those pieces. Not to mention, obviously, they have a lot of talent, so it wasn't like a fluke thing. But I still think that at the end of the day, the people that they have on this team are going to help turn the ship. And it's not a guarantee by any means. I don't think we should be surprised that they've hit a stretch here during the season where they're not playing their best basketball, because it was pretty much inevitable that was going to happen.
They looked inevitable to start the year, though, with the shooting, with the offensive performances that they got across the board there. And I do think some of the guys coming back to earth showed how much of a team effort it was last year. You had a lot of massive contributions up and down the roster on the way to the championship last year that haven't been there to begin this year, whether due to injuries or general inconsistency to start the year. More guys down than doing the same thing or up at the start of this season. And for Philadelphia, it's the year from hell. I think that's probably going to continue here because even in this win, Embiid goes down, McCain's out for the year. So there's still a lot of strange stuff around this team. And then Embiid got hurt falling into the crowd before the game and then got hurt again late in the game, his other ankle there. So it didn't get any less weird for this team in this game, but you do see the construct of a team that can match, play with, and bother Boston in different ways. And Joel Embiid talked about that ability to match up with Boston and their new personnel after this game. How much better do you feel like you guys match up against Boston compared to in the past now?
We've always lacked wings, and when you go against Boston, you need those wings. You need guys that can switch, and obviously they got a bunch of great players. Starting with JT, JB is great. So you gotta be able to guard those guys. They want to shoot a lot of threes. They play a lot of one-on-one, create for their teammates. So you gotta make sure you don't have any mismatches on the floor to be able to go against them. And like I said, we've always lacked a lot of wings in the past, and I feel like you can never have enough, but I feel like we have quite a few now.
Embiid there saying they have a lot of wings this time around, and I do think he almost caught himself dissing past versions of the Sixers, which he's done before, and said in the past we didn't have a lot of wings. They had Ben Simmons, they had some other guys, but I get what he's saying. Tobias Harris, who just left. And George wasn't great in this game, but just having him out there, a presence who can stay in front of Brown, Tatum, that's the name of the game if you're going to try to match up with those guys. And they got Martin because of his success, because of his ability to match up with Boston almost exclusively. It was like the Horford signing that they made years ago, and he's been inconsistent to start this year. But him showing up against the Celtics matters, and you have Embiid in the post. And I like that, too, because even though the Celtics hit 23s in this game, it pushed them out to the perimeter, so they have to hit threes to be able to beat Philadelphia. They couldn't get to the rim inside the arc in this game. So I like the general matchups across the board. I think that size hurts Boston, forces them to play bigger, as they did throughout much of this game. And Maxi's speed, again, I don't think they have an answer to that. And he's harder to take advantage of in the defensive end of the floor than he has been in the past. So do I think Philadelphia can beat Boston 4 times? Given everything that's happened this year, and is probably going to continue to happen with them, I say no. But they do have the pieces, if everything goes right, that you can actually imagine it happening.
Yeah, I mean, a couple weeks ago, I feel like we were getting made fun of for picking Philadelphia as the biggest threat by Jimmy, yeah, and maybe others too. But I get why, because obviously they had a disastrous start to the season, but ultimately, like, they did have an off season that was thought-provoking in a way. They still have more talent than most of these Eastern Conference teams. And I know that all Celtics fans are not worried about Philadelphia because historically, Boston always comes out on top.
But what if you see them in the first round? That's where I think you're the most worried about them.
Because they're still like fresher at that point?
No, because that's a way harder team than you want to see in round one.
Oh, yeah. I mean, definitely it's a harder team than you want to see. But at the same time, I think you might face... There's a number of teams that could be challenging in the first round. And I never really wanted, we thought about Miami last year. Obviously, Jimmy was out, but I liked the idea of a hard first round. I actually don't think that that's a bad thing. We talked about Atlanta the year prior and how maybe sometimes the weak teams are the ones that can give you trouble because we know this team has a history of overlooking people. So I'm not worried about when it would happen. But I do think that if Maxey continues playing the way he's been playing of late, if Embiid can get healthier, and then if Paul George can find some rhythm, because he's a shell of himself right now. And I still think defensively he gives them something that they haven't had. I thought that he was good defensively versus the Celtics. He's not the defender he once was, but he's still very solid. But he's gonna find some rhythm that he doesn't right now have. So I don't think that they've hit their stride yet. So I'm excited. I'm glad they still have a couple more matchups. I feel like the Celtics have already finished with their Milwaukee Bucks, stint. So now they still have 2 more games against Philadelphia, and we'll see. I think Christmas Day should light a fire under them. The fact that happened on national television on Christmas Day. Nobody wants to lose on Christmas. And I think that they probably felt comfortable that they were going to win that one, and then were kind of stunned afterwards. And post-game, I thought that was the first time this season where guys were willing to be like, this is, we're not playing great. We need to do better. So far after the first 7 losses, we heard things about, this is good that this happened, or we took this away, or we played hard, we just, we didn't make shots. This was the first time where I felt like they were willing to say it was more than just a single game issue, whether it was a larger theme. And so I'm curious how they'll respond to that. If that's indicative that, next game they're going to come out and we're going to say, wow, whatever they talked about worked, or if it's the beginning of a lot of press conferences where people are saying things like that.
And that starts tonight against Indiana. We'll get to them in a little bit here. First, I want to let you know about PrizePicks, and there's no better time to run your game on PrizePicks than right now with football going on, the playoffs fast approaching, and basketball every night now. And it's basketball back in full swing now that Christmas is past and the NBA Cup and all of that. Every night you're getting basketball action across the sports world, and hockey, baseball will be back before you know it as well. And on PrizePicks, all you have to do is pick more or less at least 2 players to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app, and your full season leagues probably come and gone at this point. So go over there for daily fantasy action where you can just pick 2 or more players and win if those projections hit. They're always giving away free squares. They did a Nikola Jokic one, more than 0.5 points on Christmas, so always great opportunities, whether it's that or Taco Tuesday, to just get more action out of PrizePicks. And it's a great experience right on your app. You can see what they're predicting guys are going to do each and every night. So go over there and check it out and use the code CLNS to get a $50 bonus when you play a $5 lineup. Just use CLNS, play $5 and get $50 in bonus credit over at PrizePicks. You don't even need to win to get the bonus over there. So again, PrizePicks, run your game, CLNS, $50 instantly after you play your $5 lineup. Before we talk about the Pacers, I want to talk about Jimmy Butler because we got some news on him yesterday from the Heat directly, who said, we're not trading Jimmy Butler this year. There was a report before that he preferred to leave Miami at this point. So the first official stance from his camp that he wants out effectively. I know they're not calling it a trade demand, but that's effectively what this is. And then he sits out the game last night with return to play conditioning, which sounds pretty dubious, and he's going to miss the next 2 apparently with that as well. So this is a standoff now. I don't know how much leverage he has, given that this offseason he goes into free agency passing up $50 million. I don't know if he's going to pass up $50 million, and you can't just sit out this whole year if you're him. So the Heat are in a pretty good spot, except for the fact that if you're them, you probably want to move on, and there aren't any offers, and there isn't much buzz around him right now. It feels like the Rockets have moved on, don't have any interest there. The Warriors are in a weird spot now, having just acquired Schroeder, and he's not playing well. They're not playing well, losing of 7 of 10, and there aren't any other suitors there unless it's a surprise one. So when that trade request came out, I thought Butler was going to be out of there in short order. Now, I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, this is a weird situation because on one hand, you do want to trade him to get something for him. You don't want him to just walk. So if you're Miami, I understand why they're signaling that they're not going to trade him, but you'd imagine that they're making calls. Maybe they've made all the calls there are to make and realized that they don't have really any.
That's got to be what it is.
Yeah, that might be what it is. This has been an interesting, from just an NBA reporting standpoint, this has been an interesting saga because from the beginning, Bernie Lee, I believe is his name, Jimmy Butler's agent, has been resounding in his denial of all of Shams' reports around Jimmy wanting out, Jimmy, requesting a trade. And I think the language is that there's not been an official trade request, but obviously the situation is strange. Obviously, we've seen Jimmy's increased, disenchantment with the franchise over the last season and a half. I would say dating back to when they didn't trade for Damian Lillard. I feel like you've started to see a lack of investment. And then I think last year with Pat Riley calling him out, I know some reports have stated that was a little bit of an inflection point for him when Pat Riley said, if you're not going to play, keep your mouth shut, which was certainly an interesting press conference.
They, for all intents and purposes, seem done with him. And I think this is
seem
him
done with
saying,
him, yeah. And
I'm
they
done with you too.
They have a lot of young guys. So
Yep.
it's like his timeline no longer matches that franchise. I still think there's a lot that Jimmy can give. I think that we've seen the difference. Not to them. I mean, I think that chapter is going to end. But I think him going somewhere, I'm interested in where he lands because he hasn't been relevant to people in quite some time because he missed last year's playoffs. But 2 years ago, he was one of the best players in this league. I mean, he was during that playoff run. You have to respect what he was able to do to upset Milwaukee and Boston and kind of lead that team to the finals that had no business in being there. And I know it was more than just him, but I think any team that he goes to, any team that's in the championship mix, he could be the factor that elevates them really into contention. So I know right now it seems like some of those initial reports, Phoenix, Houston, Golden State are at a somewhat of a standstill, but something changes and we know how quickly things can change. I'd be really intrigued to see where he lands.
I'm still looking at the Warriors because I know they're fading, but you can't just let this season fade away if you're them, can you? I know they have their visions for the future, and Curry's not about to hang it up, but he did give an interview saying you're not going to play forever going into that Christmas slate. They're probably only going to have 1 or 2 more years of contention with him, if they can even get back to that. And they're not a contending team right now. I mean, they're on the verge of falling out of the postseason picture altogether in the West. And unsurprisingly, the Schroeder thing's not working right now. You could give it some time, but he was a dubious fit there to begin with in my mind. So I know you mentioned before that they could put him into a deal like this. Kuminga, he's a free agent this summer, so I don't think there's any strong commitment to him. And Butler's fit I have questions about too, but it's more natural than Schroeder's. At least he's just more impactful, consistent player than Schroeder. So I don't know why they don't kick the tires on this. I know it's going to get tricky from a draft pick perspective, and you're going to have to throw Wiggins in there, who I'm not even sure the Heat would want. But to me, that still makes the most sense of any team here. And the Warriors are going to get so desperate at a certain point that I think they're going to almost have to do something like this.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, Steph Curry's too good right now still to just call it. Like, I think that's why they re-signed, Draymond, why they're not willing to just ship out the rest of the young core in favor of winning now. But
now,
they
can
also,
Butler save them?
I think their problems are probably a little deeper than his. But here's the thing, though. Like, a couple months ago, at the beginning of the season, the Warriors were looking like one of the best teams in the West. And so
I was so intrigued by them after they beat the Celtics.
But that's just the way this league is. Like, things change so fast. And a team like Oklahoma City, one year they're in the play-in, the next year they're the 1 seed. And, like, Houston Rockets, last year to this year, it's just a massive jump, right? And so sometimes it's not about a personnel thing. It's about things just coming together. I mean, nobody could have predicted the Sacramento Kings' downfall this season, just the extent to which they've plummeted. And so I still think the Warriors have enough. That being said, I'm not a big fan of Jonathan Kuminga, and I think that he's critical to that team and what they're doing. And so I think at a certain point, he either has to start playing a lot better, or you got to get him out of there. And I think Andrew Wiggins too. We've seen the highs and lows of him, certainly in 2022 being so critical, and then other times just being like a below average role player. So there are so many individual guys whose performances can fluctuate quite a bit, but Draymond still is Draymond Green. I think you see flashes from him defensively where I'm like, we're watching a guy who is a very special player on the court. Steph Curry, Christmas Day was a perfect example, but just the Olympic run, like he still has it. He's just not the same guy, but there's just so many. Buddy Hield's another example of a guy who earlier in the season was looking like the steal signing. I know, he always goes back to the mean, but I don't know. I'm still intrigued by Golden State. I think Jimmy helps, but Jimmy right now is like a question mark to me because we haven't seen him play at a high level in a very long time consistently, but I think he still has it. I don't have any reason to think he doesn't. But then again, sometimes it's, maybe we saw the last of the great Jimmy Butler, and that was, last year's playoff or 2 years ago's playoff. So
from an availability standpoint, certainly it feels like we've seen him at his most available, and it's going to be sparse from this point on. But his holdout now, and that's what this feels like going on this road trip here, is pretty telling of how quickly this could escalate here. And we'll see if they're able to tamper it down. Clearly the statement was an attempt at that, but he's going to miss these next few games here, and that's going to further pressurize the situation. I don't think people are going to buy that this is conditioning for much longer here, but we'll keep an eye on that. It's obviously the biggest story from a trade standpoint around the league, but the Celtics, everyone else getting back to regular game action here, and the next 7 games, we've said it, are going to be telling about where the Celtics are at right now. And if you want to attend those games, go to the Gametime app. They're home for the next 3 games here in Boston, so you can get great deals over there on Celtics and whatever other tickets you're looking for, concerts, events, hockey, baseball coming up soon here, and of course the end of the football season into the playoffs is all available on Gametime. And if you use the code CLNS right now, you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply over there. What do you get? You get all-in pricing, so you know exactly what you're paying for. You get bonus flash deals going on all the time over there as well, along with panoramic views of your seat, my favorite feature over on the Gametime app. So download it today and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase over there. Again, terms apply. What time is it? Game time. So the game tonight, Celtics, Pacers. A few guys missing on that Indiana side. Neesmith's been out for a while. Obi Toppin got hurt last night. So it's not a fully loaded Indiana side, and there's still those bumps and bruises Porzingis and Holiday are coming off of here. I feel pretty good about Porzingis coming back for this game. Holiday, we'll see. But regardless of who's out there, the Pacers are going to push them with a style, with personnel that, what have we talked about already here? Speed, bunch of different sets all within one, and just stuff that's going to space out and challenge the Celtics defense here. And we already saw that give them a extremely difficult time in the East Finals. Now, Haliburton struggling immensely. He only had 4 points last night, which he's done throughout this season. He's down like 16 a game. And they have a bunch of other inconsistency issues on offense, along with the same defensive issues as last year. So this might just not be the same Pacers team. They're like the 10 seed right now, or, down in that play-in territory. So maybe I'm overstating their ability to push the Celtics here, the way that some of these recent teams have. But it's at least an intriguing pair of games coming off some already difficult games for Boston that you can look at and say, all right, this might be a challenge again.
Yeah, I think Indiana is in that category of teams. I don't want to say in the Orlando Magic category because they haven't accrued that many wins over the Celtics over the last few seasons, but they always give them a good fight. And
well, they beat them earlier this year.
Yeah, obviously beat them earlier this season, beat them in the in-season tournament last year. So there is some history there, but they're just a tough matchup. I mean, how many times has Joe Mazzulla said that was the hardest series that they had last playoffs? I feel like he went on a press tour saying that was a big, that was a common understanding that we all shared, I think, from following and covering this team. So it's gonna be a good 2-game series. I love the fact that they have a mini series right now because it gives them a little bit of that playoff preparation process. And we've seen a few of these this year. There was the Chicago mini series. There was the Charlotte one. They're always a good opportunity, I think, just to play a game and then adjust and then play another game. And both teams are making those adjustments. And this is a moment in time where I feel like they're at an inflection point in their season. I'm sure they feel, whether or not that's the perfect characterization in their eyes, I'm sure they feel like there's a little bit of an extra significance right now playing, just considering this most recent stretch and some of the feelings around it and the Christmas day of it all. So I'm looking forward to this one. And I do think that regardless of how Haliburton's been playing and the fact that Indiana has been underwhelming, I thought they were going to be a lot better this season than they have. They still have the pieces to be very difficult for the Celtics. And we've seen that. We saw last year when Haliburton went down how difficult they were to face. And so I never count them out. They're one of the teams that I have a lot of respect for in this league. And also, we also know that it really doesn't matter who they're playing. If they're not going to bring their A game, like any team is capable of winning here. So perfect timing for a mini series against an Eastern Conference opponent that they have history with, and that has given them some trouble over the years.
And Siakam rolling too, and I'm still so impressed by what he did in that series. Completely torched them. They had no answer for him. Whether they want him to go off or not, it's another question. But he got anything he wanted in that series, especially from inside the arc. And Haliburton, I don't know what's going on with him. There's back issues to begin the year, maybe similar to what Hauser's dealt with, and it would make sense for his production to drop off if that's the case. But they're not the same team without him. And last night against the Thunder, they're competitive. They're in that game, and they faded so fast late because they didn't have a go-to hand late in that situation. I know Matherin's been able to give them some quick points off the bench, which is a nice difference. He killed the Celtics earlier this year, by the way. Then you had Andrew Nembhard
Matherin's been
going
starting
off.
quite a bit too, right?
So Nembhard, he can spill into those Haliburton shoes, but it's Haliburton's playmaking, shooting, and all the way down the line that made them a special team a year ago. And I know he went down in that series and they stayed competitive throughout. McConnell, a big reason for that as well. But I feel like Haliburton needs to be great for them to actually beat the Celtics in these games, and he hasn't been that so far.
No, I mean, thinking of where he was a year ago, he was the top vote getter for Eastern Conference All-Star.
And he made All-NBA too, right?
Yeah, he was All-NBA. I thought he shouldn't have made All-NBA just because he did drop off immensely after the All-Star break. I thought someone like Jalen deserved it over him, but point being, he hasn't been Tyrese Haliburton that we saw in the in-season tournament, for example, since it's been almost a year now. It's been like almost a full year, because in the spring he just wasn't nearly the same guy. He was playing on minutes restrictions. I think some of that was chasing All-NBA and chasing the money and accolades that come with that.
He had that brutal injury against the Celtics.
Yeah, and then the hamstring thing, and a lot of that stuff's connected. The hamstring, the back, I don't know exactly. I know in the Olympics he obviously wasn't in the rotation, and then there were some reports that part of it was that he was dealing with some injuries. So he's also one of those guys. I mean, he wasn't on the finals team, but he's one of those guys that played through May, played on the Olympics.
Great point.
And a lot of those guys have been struggling. And so I think he's going to bounce back. I still think that I love his game. I love the fact that he's like just a great passer. I like the fact that his unorthodox shot has proved people wrong, and at his best, he's so fun to watch. When he kind of ascended into stardom last year during the tournament run, I thought this is like he's one of the guys that's going to really capture the league by the storm. So his struggles have been disappointing and kind of hard to explain because some nights it looks like he's just not looking for his shot. He looks like he's just not being aggressive. Like he almost reminds me a little bit of like old Rondo before he could shoot. Where he's just really, really avoiding the basket. And he was a really good three-point shooter at points. So some of it's just a confidence thing too. But this team is going to go as far as he can take them. And as much as they gave them Celtics a good fight last year without him, nobody's scared of that Indiana team. I think you can appreciate them, you can respect their fight, and I think Rick Carlisle's done a great job with them. But they were the Pacers last year because of what Haliburton did.
Yeah, and he's
team.
in an inflection point in his career to be taking 6 shots in 30 minutes like he did.
That's
I know
wild.
he was playing a little bit better before that. But that's all aggressiveness and assertiveness. He has the green light on that team and the ball in his hands, so there's no excuse for him to be taking 6 shots in a game. That's like almost Ben Simmons stuff that you're talking about there. So we'll see if he can get back to himself in this mini-series here. Between the Celtics having, and I know I said this going into Christmas, so we'll see if it actually plays out, but them having a wake-up call the last couple games, Indiana having no answers defensively, especially when you consider Toppin and Neesmith out as their wing defenders, essentially. Siakam can do some stuff there, but they're missing some bodies defensively, and offensively, they've had a weird dynamic here with the whole Haliburton situation. So I actually do think the Celtics are going to take both of these games here. They'll be close, they'll be competitive, but I think the Thunder game last night is a good example of what the Celtics are probably going to do in these games here. And the second game could be a runaway, given the way the Celtics have been able to adjust coming off the first ones.
Yeah, that's a good point. They really have been able to adjust off those first games in those mini-series. It's fun that they're both home, so you don't have that travel in between. You're really just able to focus on these 2 games. And they don't have practice tomorrow, so they're kind of sort of saving their legs in between this more difficult schedule. And yeah, after this, you get Toronto, and then you're going out west for, I think, what is going to be the beginning of a very difficult January. And so you want to rack up some wins here. I think these 3 games are all very, very winnable. And then when you go out west, you're going to drop some. That's just inevitable with the travel and just the level of competition and some of these teams being brand new, at least this year's iteration. So,
but if you win all of them, you make that statement again that you're by and far above the rest of the league. So I wouldn't rule it out either if they do get themselves right here.
Yeah, I wouldn't rule out anything with this team. I think, and just honestly with any team, it's so hard to predict how these road trips, these stints can go.
I'd rule out a collapse. I mean, the stretch is so difficult that they could collapse over the next
I was
7
meaning
here.
in a favorable way.
Yeah.
I wouldn't rule out anything. I wouldn't be surprised if they won 10 straight. I would be very surprised if they collapsed here. I don't think that we have any reason to think that. And I know people aren't happy to see them lose. And on Christmas in particular, I feel like people were extra frustrated versus Philadelphia and just the nature of that game being a little bit uninspiring. But ultimately, I think it's good for people to remember, they still have the 3rd best record in the league. By all numbers, their defense and offense have both been good this season, as much as we've had our own qualms, and there have been guys that have struggled individually that I think are going to regress to the mean. I think Jaylen Brown's going to find an offensive rhythm that's more consistent. I think Drew Holiday is not going to shoot 32% from 3 all year. So overall, this is going to be a good stretch for them to show where they're at mentally too. I think some people were calling out the team in post game, and so this is an opportunity for them to respond. And I'm really intrigued for this weekend. I think we're gonna have a much better sense of this team after these next 2 games versus Indiana, just how they were able to respond to a difficult stretch.
All right. We'll have coverage of it on the Garden Report. Post-game live begins right after the game tonight, 7:30 tip-off, Celtics, Pacers. Rematch of the East Finals and the first of 2 games between these 2 here in Boston. Ahead of the new year, just 3 games left in 2024, and then they're off on the West Coast trip. We'll probably preview that West Coast trip later next week. But for now, Noa Dalzell, Bobby Manning, check out PrizePicks, check out the Gametime app as well. Use code CLNS for both of them over there, and we'll talk to you later tonight after the game.